Greetings. This video is about thesis statements, in particular, we're going to talk about the argumentative with a counterpoint. So to do that, we start with this umbrella metaphor. So there's a main topic that you're going to discuss, and you're going to make a point or position. Now, a point really, in my mind, is when you're doing an explanatory essay. So it could be either one, and usually with an explanatory essay, you don't have a counter argument, but you can if you're just explaining and not really arguing a point. So that's why I included this here. So you can have a main topic or point or position, and your position is what you talk about in your argument paper. It's your side you take. Now, people traditionally think of this as abortion, yes, abortion, no. They talk about death penalty, yes, death penalty, no, but it's not really that simple in academic writing. As a matter of fact, if you have a great instructor, your instructor is not going to allow those overdone topics, because you can throw a rock and find sources, and it really doesn't help you increase your skills in research. Now, there are ways to take those topics and narrow those down in a way that you can use them, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. There are other videos on the channel that do. So, for the first part, this umbrella includes your supporting points. Now, you may have more than three, okay, and you may be required to have more than three, but I'm using three just for illustration purposes. So if you think of your whole topic as this huge umbrella with all these supporting things under it, right? The support is holding it up. That's really what we're talking about here, even with thesis statements. So the next part just shows, like, okay, so we're going to talk about funding in adoptions. And one of my favorite argument papers is Arguing for a Change. And I like that because it's a little more difficult. It is definitely college level. It finds a problem out there and says, hey, let's do something about this, which helps further, the community sometimes. It can help bring ideas for different things. So I really like this one. So funding in adoptions is just one topic that you could choose, and this would be your main topic. And under the umbrella of that, as you're doing your research, sometimes your research could be as simple as putting in problems with adoptions, right? And you might come up with all kinds of things. Now, sometimes you might have to brainstorm and think, okay, what happens in adoptions? Sometimes they don't have insurance. Sometimes they don't have money. Families would adopt more if they had more support. So you might be brainstorming, and then you can look up things like adoptions and finances, adoptions and law or legal costs. So there's lots of ways to research this, but for the purposes of this, I just want to show you some points that you could have chosen. Supporting point one would be to increase adoption rates. So it can show how extra funding can increase adoption rates. Now, if we're talking research here, what I would tell you is if you're going to research how that helps, you can actually go in and see what states are using funding currently to help increase adoption rates, and what way are they doing that. So you could actually support that. And then the second one, assist adopting families with legal fees. So you can imagine that sometimes the legal fees are very costly. Sometimes the home studies have to be paid for in different states for people to be able to adopt. There are all kinds of things. So if those were wiped out, and they may be, you may already see cases somewhere in a state, and that would be your goal, is to find support where this might be used in a different place, and you want it applied to Kentucky or Alabama or whatever state you're living in. So supporting point number three, increase success rates in placement. I mean, think about that. If you've got some funding and support, you're going to provide the children insurance for a certain amount of time once they're adopted. That can really help increase, or it could even be supportive services, funding for mental health services for children who've been traumatized and are placed in new homes, forever homes. And then that funding for that mental health service might actually help keep that child in placement. So there are lots of ways you could do it. But these are just a few examples that you could choose. Now here shows the counter argument. So what is the problem with funding adoptions, right? Adding more funding. More funding is needed in adoptions. One of the I would guess. One of the main issues with that would be it's costly. It's costly to the government. It might be costly to the community. It depends on where the tax revenue is coming from to help with that. So you can see that there can be a counter argument to that, even though we're not doing the traditional type of argument that you think of as like pro-con, right? We're saying, hey, we need more funding in this area. So hopefully that helped a little bit. And if you do like what you hear here, please make sure that you like and follow the channel. And this was put on by Education Universe and Writing Made Easy. And then just stay tuned because we are going to go over a few examples of thesis statements so that you can see what that looks like in the generator. We're going to generate those with a tool that's already online. So here we have my very favorite thesis generator, and that is the writingcenter.ua. Well, it's writingcenter.uagc.edu/thesis-generator. So you can see that up at the top, and you're welcome to go there, and I encourage it as well. We use this in class all the time. I love this tool. I know that people will ask you to construct a thesis in a different way, but this can really get you started. And one of the things I love about it is it includes examples as you're going down. And it also tells you kind of how to say it. So if you say your phrase the same way that this is said, it's gonna generate a really nice working thesis statement. So your rough draft, right, of your thesis statement. And then as you start doing more research, you may find that you have to change different parts of your thesis statement so that it will work for your research. So just because you start out with one does not in any way mean that you keep it. It just means that you have it there and that you can tweak it as you need to go. So the very first thing is your topic. So we're talking about funding and adoption, right? So we could just put adoption funding. So it's literally saying, hey, state your topic. Let's look at this. Now, state your main idea about this topic. I tell students to start with a should statement, even though it seems elementary, but I think it works well when you're first starting. So who should do something, right? In this case, if we're talking about funding for adoption, it's probably government. So the government should devote additional funding revenue to adoption services. And we can always reword this. It's not like set in stone. So let's look down here. Give a reason that supports your main idea. So the way they've worded is, it is not always intellectually stimulating. And what we have is like, it can increase adoption rates, right? Funding may increase adoption rates over time. Okay. So we've worded it similar to what it is in there, only I went ahead and added in funding may, so we can be really specific about it, and then we'll see how it turns out in the end. So it prevents social interaction. That we're actually talking about television and children. And our next one is assist with legal fees. It might help, reduce the burden of legal fees. Let's say it that way. So funding. Oops. We reverted back. Hold on. Okay. So it may reduce the burden of legal fees, which actually would increase adoption rates over time. So we can use different points and change them later if we feel like they're too broad, too narrow, won't work. Let's see, it may, we don't want to say it will increase it for sure. Increase success rates in adoption placements. So let's do that one and see what happens. And then we already said, hey, the opposing viewpoint or the counterpoint is probably cost, right? New funding may be too costly. And we could even be specific and say from the community, or who's it costly to. The budget won't support it. There are different ways to say this, but we're just going for generate your thesis in simple format. So let's go ahead and generate that and see if there's any changes that need to be made to. And here you see the rough draft of a thesis statement. Now again, this is not a perfect entity. This is a tool to help. So, and I like the way that it leads you into how to say it and how to construct it. And here it is. So while new funding may be too costly, the government should devote additional funding revenue to adoption services because funding may increase adoption rates over time. It may reduce the burden of legal fees on families, we could have put, and it may increase success rates in adoption placements. So it's pretty nice for a rough draft. Of course, you have to be able to find evidence to support each point that you have. So your umbrella here, right here, the government should devote additional funding revenue to adoption services. Here's your points underneath the actual, underneath your, I went blank for a minute, umbrella. And then here is your counter to that. So you've added that up there too. And if we go back and look, you can see how this umbrella works. So your funding, your points, and your little counter argument up there is just a matter of putting it into words. So I love this analogy, and I hope that it works for you. And don't forget that liking and supporting the channel on YouTube will help a bunch. You can actually search for Writing Made Easy. It usually pops up pretty easy, and here's the icon. And then Education Universe has information on it. It's new and it's being built, but it has information about formatting and a few other things on the blog. So if you did /blog, you'll see that. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.